I want to talk about Masonic obligations. I'm Brother Fluff, a proud Texas Freemason, and I know quite a bit about obligations because I've taken quite a few Masonic obligations. Now, whether you want to call an obligation, an oath, or a vow, it's basically you making a promise that you're going to uphold your end of the bargain. And once you make that obligation, you are morally or legally bound to perform that duty. And most likely, if you go into a Freemason live and you say, oh, Freemasons take evil oaths, they're going to say, no, we don't take evil oaths, we take obligations. That's because words do matter. But for the sake of this video, I'm saying Freemasons take oaths, obligations, and vows. And the reason why I'm saying it like that is because we all make those commitments in our lives, whether we're getting married, whether we are signing a contract for a new job, whatever. Everybody has made some sort of commitment that they are legally bound to in their life. And then there's those of us who actually believe in spirituality and believe in an afterlife and believe in God. And so we may make a spiritual obligation. One of my mentors in life is this old guy that I used to work for. He was a farmer. He was an amazing man. He was like 5'0", this really short guy. Just a really good person. His name was BJ. And BJ was a World War II veteran. He was in the Navy, and how he got in the Navy was hilarious. He was 16 years old, drove his motorcycle through his high school in a really small town, got arrested, went to the judge. The judge said, you want to go to jail? And he said, no, sir, I want to enlist in the Navy. The judge said, deal. And he hammered that gavel down, and before you know it, BJ was stationed on the USS Franklin in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Now, the USS Franklin suffered from 2 kamikaze attacks from 2 separate occasions, one off the Philippines and one off the coast of Japan. And I'll be completely honest, I do not know which battle BJ was in. I want to say it was the Philippines, but I don't remember. He passed away, man, in like 2011. But I do remember him telling me that he was trapped and underneath the waterline with a few other sailors, and it was somewhere in an engine compartment or something like that. It was bulkhead, and it was locked tight, but they didn't know if they were sinking and going to survive. And so he was, at this point, 16, 17-year-old kid, and he was scared for his life. All of the sailors were. And so they started praying. They started reciting the Lord's Prayer. And he said that none of them actually knew it, but with all of them together, they were able to piece it together. During that recital of prayer, BJ gave his life to Christ, and he made a promise to God. Some would say a vow, an oath, or even an obligation, that if God allowed him to survive, he would get out of the Navy and go serve his church and pastor and do whatever God called him to do. BJ survived, and he went on to become a Methodist preacher. And he was kind of a funny preacher. He was a cowboy, and he loved to go cowboy and preach at church. And so he would get in with these crews, and he would baptize cowboys in the pastures and the water tanks and stuff. And it was kind of frowned upon at the time because it was supposed to be some sort of holiness to it, but he was more concerned about leading men to Christ than he was where they were led. Now, if he hadn't have kept his promise, what would his life have looked like after that? Would have God sent a kamikaze on a random day in the 1960s to get him? I don't think so. But he made a promise to God, and he kept that promise. I share that story because in Freemasonry, a lot of times when you hear brethren talk, you'll hear them say something like, I'm obligated to you, brother, and I'm obligated to do this. And yeah, okay, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the fellowship, yes, it binds us together. But that obligation, I have never made an obligation to another man. The Freemason obligation is not an obligation to the lodge. It is not an obligation to the brotherhood. It is an obligation to your God. And my God being the God of Abraham, the father of Christ, that is who my obligation is to. That's who I took my obligation to. So I'm not bound by man or a building. I'm bound by the creator of the universe. And I say that because you may come across some channels some videos, some exposés, some books where these supposed Masons say that they are no longer bound to the fraternity because the fraternity has expelled them, kicked them out, or they left. They chose to leave on their own free will and accord. So they're no longer obligated to it. And I hate to tell them, that's not right. And the really scary thing is those that do understand that they took their obligations to God and they continue to break their obligations now because just because they're out of the fraternity does not mean that they are no longer bound to God. That's scary because that shows a complete lack of moral integrity. And fraternity was never meant for them. I don't know about other brothers, but feel free to chime in. If you were expelled from Freemasonry, would you just so willingly break your obligation to God? I know I wouldn't. Because on yonder book, that oath I took, will I break it? Never. But live by this, and this, and this, forever and ever. So mote it be.